There's this guy by the name of Andrew Tate. I'm sure a lot of you, most of you, maybe all of you have heard of him. And he went on Piers Morgan's show, and they're going to have an interesting debate here. Now, I'll admit up front, I don't know that much about Andrew Tate, but here's what I do know. I do know he was recently deplatformed from like most of the big social media platforms. And I do know that his philosophy is, I guess you can accurately describe it as this like red pill philosophy, which is this idea of like, you know, men need to be men and get their shit together and, you know, get women, get money, things of that nature, right? Like that's the red pill philosophy. So I've maybe seen a grand total of like 2 or 3 minutes of Andrew Tate content in my life. But I have seen, you know, like analogous channels to his, and that seems to be the philosophy. So I've seen like the Fresh and Fit guys, and that seems to be their perspective, is like, get your shit together, get money, get women. Then they have some strange ideas around relationships where like they're sort of in favor of polyamory, but they say only the guy could have multiple women, and the woman can't have multiple guys. And they make these arguments that stem back to, well, that's just in our nature, so that's how it's supposed to be, or whatever. So anyway, I'm getting off on a side tangent here. And the other thing is, I know there happen to be some questionable legal things around Andrew Tate, right? But I don't know too much of the specifics. Obviously, he's not in prison, right? So take it for what it is. But he has a debate with Piers Morgan. Again, I think this all stems back to him being deplatformed, so he's kind of viewed as like a pariah, and Piers Morgan wanted to bring him on, and I guess try to hold him accountable a little bit, get some clout off of this, get some views off of this. Let's watch their debate, and I'll break it down as we go here.
Do you respect women?
Absolutely. Why wouldn't I?
Do you
All right. I got on 1.25 times speed.
think that 18, 19-year-old women are more attractive than 25-year-old women?
I think there's attractive people. That's a loaded question. I don't know.
Well, it's not really, is it?
I can't.
You know why I'm asking it?
Of course I do, but I can't sit here and
for
say.
the benefit of viewers who don't know why I'm asking, you said this. In general, this is also one of the reasons men find youth attractive. You want to block the internet? I'll block the internet right effing now. The reason 18 and 19-year-olds are more attractive than 25-year-olds is because they've been through less dick. People say, oh, you can't say that, but yes, I can.
Hearing Piers Morgan say that is kind of hilarious. They've been through less dick.
A 19-year-old is more attractive than a 26-year-old woman, and I'll tell you why. Because that 26-year-old has talked to more guys, been to the club more times, been effed and dumped more times, more arguments, more mess, more for me to clean up. That is misogyny.
Why?
Because you are encouraging a mindset about 25-year-old women that makes them sound out to be infinitely less desirable than 18, 19-year-olds.
Okay. In this conversation, I want to agree with Piers here, but I do think... So, misogyny is like, you think women are inferior. That's what misogyny is. Now, has Andrew Tate made other comments that are like, analogous, or just, I think women are inferior? Maybe. I don't know. Again, I haven't seen much of his content. And if you can show me quotes like that, I'd probably be like, not good, condemn it, and yeah, that is misogynist, right? But using this argument to say, oh, he's misogynist, I think it's a little sketchy, because there are plenty of people who would agree with Andrew Tate on that, who are not misogynists, who think, yeah, women are equal, but I personally prefer a woman this age versus that age, right? Now, I will say this also, I do think the argument that he's making about the age difference thing, I don't agree with that at all. Look, everybody knows I'm with Crystal. Crystal's older than me. One of many things I like about being with Crystal, being with somebody older than me, is that there's like a maturity thing, which is huge. Like, are most guys going to say, probably from a physical perspective, I prefer the 19-year-old to the 25-year-old? Probably, although, when you're 25, the idea somebody's 25 is like too far gone and they're already on the decline. I think that's an extreme thought. I think 25 is like totally still in the prime, right? But a lot of guys might say that, but in terms of like, generally speaking, like temperamentally, and personality-wise, and life-wise, who's going to have their shit more in order, the 25-year-old or the 19-year-old? And in the majority of cases, it's obviously the 25-year-old. And it's like, well, how much do you value that aspect of a relationship? And I feel like that's a huge thing that maybe some dudes, maybe most dudes, would overlook that aspect of a relationship, but like do that at your own fucking peril, because it's a super important and crucial part of a relationship. If you want things to be smooth and you want to get along and you want to have intelligent conversations, you want to roughly be with somebody who has some fucking life experience under their belt. They've been around the block. They understand the world, the way the world works more. And, you know, that you're going to get that more with a 25-year-old versus a 19-year-old or whatever. So I feel like his perspective is very equivalent to like what fucking Kyle in high school would say or Kyle in college would say, right? And, you know, I look back at that now and I go, that's kind of immature and kind of naive, you know, but he's making the argument and probably dressing it up and intellectualizing it. So I don't agree with Piers that this particular comment is necessarily misogynist, but I just would say I disagree with Andrew Tate on just the idea being expressed that, you know, whatever, 19 is always going to be preferable to 25. It's like, I don't agree with that at all. In fact, my preference would probably be the opposite. It'd be much more likely to like the 25-year-old over the 19-year-old. Okay, let's continue.
And having effectively been having too much sex to be taken in a more respectful way.
Well, firstly, even if that was the case, that wouldn't be misogyny.
But what did you mean by what you said?
That's not misogyny because it's not anti-women. I'm saying that an 18 or a 19-year-old woman would be more desirable.
Pretty anti-25-year-old women.
Anti-25-year-old women we can argue, but not misogyny.
Well, that's misogyny.
No, it's not.
Being anti any woman at all is misogyny.
No, again, I would argue misogyny is if you think women are like inferior to men, right? And again, I don't know his whole record. He might have quotes out there that are very clearly misogynistic, so I'm not going to say I absolve him of all this stuff. But I'm just saying on this particular comment, I don't think that's misogynistic in the same way that if a woman preferred a 19-year-old dude to a 25-year-old dude, or a 25-year-old dude to a 19-year-old dude, that's like you hate men, if that's the case. Or you're a misandrist. Is that the term for hating men, misandry? I think it is. You're a misandrist if you prefer one age to another. I just think that's a big stretch.
What I'm saying that women are beautiful and attractive at a certain age and saying that age.
You're saying 18, 19-year-olds are more attractive than 25.
Well, than ageist, perhaps, but misogynistic, absolutely
Is that
not.
really? But you just accepted it was misogyny.
No, I didn't. You said it was misogyny. I'm telling you, no, it's not.
If a 26-year-old woman is watching this and has heard those comments,
yeah.
Would you just say to her, look, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that?
No, I won't. I will say that I am sorry that offends you. However, there's a large contingent of the world.
That doesn't mean you're sorry.
No, I'm not sorry. That's the point I'm making. I'm sorry if that offends you. However, there's a large contingent of the world that believe that, and I was mediating for a conversation.
Parts of the world that believe that about 26-year-old women are parts of the world where women are not allowed out on their own.
That's a conversation.
They have to wear full burqas.
Well, that's a conversation.
They're not allowed to.
Again, I don't necessarily agree with what Piers is saying here, because I think there are plenty of dudes who, at least if they feel like they're not going to get judged for their comment, would say like, yeah, I prefer them that age to that age. You know, but another thing that I would definitely disagree with Tate on, and I never really understood this point, the whole like, you know, preference for virgins, preference for women that have no experience. I do feel like that sort of stems from almost an insecurity, right? Because if a woman, if in a woman's past is, you know, how it fill in the blank with however many men and experiences and whatnot. The idea that would like weigh on your mind when you're with that person presently, it's like that is almost by definition insecurity. Because look, she's with you now, so why the fuck would you care? Now I understand the argument. Hey, if you get into the range of like you've had 400 partners, then it's like, oh, okay, maybe a little much, right? But like generally speaking, you know, the past on that front is irrelevant. Like life is messy. Men and women try in relationships. They fail most of the time. So, you know, most people have some experience. This idea of like the virgin or whatever is closest to a virgin is preferable. I just find that weird because you're trading off, again, life experience, maturity for like blank slateism. And some people prefer the maturity and the experience to the blank slateism. You know, it never understood. And the other thing is, there is a contradiction, and this happens all the time in male circles. It's like, on the one hand, this is when you're like in high school, college, whatever. They'll be like, oh yeah, this girl's a prude or whatever, bro. You know, like she's tough to get. So on the one hand, they'll slam that, but then on the other hand, they end up saying like, yeah, I want like a virgin or somebody who's a quote unquote prude. So it's like, which is it? And the reality is, when a guy does sleep with a girl, and let's say a woman has slept with multiple guys, the guy will like that in the moment. Like, if a girl's sleeping with a guy, he'll like that. But then what? Like, after the fact, he's like, fucking whore, fucking slut, bro. It's like, wait, what is ideal here to you? Like, what is your actual standard? How do you feel about this? It seems like a very contradictory belief at the heart of a lot of men, you know? And look, I'm a dude. I've been in high school. I've been in college. I'm very familiar with all these kinds of conversations.
Drive cars.
That's nothing to do with me.
But is that the kind of world for women that you...
I was mediating a conversation.
No, I'm asking you what you think.
I don't live in a country where that happens.
So you're using that as the excuse for why you're not sorry for saying it.
It's not an excuse.
Is that there are parts of the world where this is fine?
My friend,
so my question to you is, well, do you think it's fine?
I don't think it's fine. I live in a world where...
You don't think it's fine?
The reason
this isn't that hard, Andrew. You can simply say...
Piers he's kind of annoying me here. And again, I'm more inclined to agree with Piers in this conversation, but like, he's doing this weird badgering and doing giant logical leaps and reaches, so it's just kind of stupid. Anyway.
Hey, Piers, you know what? With the benefit of hindsight, I wish I hadn't said it like that. And if a 26-year-old woman's watching, I'm sorry I said that, because that actually is blatantly misogynist. And even though that's a view held by other parts of the world, it's not a view I...
Look, if it's his opinion and he's honest about it, it's fine. He can express that opinion. You know, my reaction to it is not, you're a misogynist based on that comment. My reaction to it is like, that's a little naive of you and a little silly. Because what he's saying, first and foremost, is that the main criteria that matters to me in a mate is like 0 life experience and like a blank slate that I can mold however I want to mold. And I think that's not the view that I have, right? That's not the view that I have. I want somebody with experience, maturity, intelligence, has grown up, been around the block, knows stuff. So I would just disagree with it. Again, it's not, this particular comment is not misogynist, but I definitely would take issue with what he said, just because I think it's misguiding people too. Like, if there are young, impressionable boys or men who watch this and they're told like, yeah, that's what you should value, it's like, well, understand, you're sacrificing a lot of other very good qualities simply at the altar of like looks or like peak fertility or whatever the fuck, you know?
Share. Now, I would respect you more if you said that than if you try and say, well, it's said in other parts of the world, so I'm not sorry.
I think
that doesn't tell me what you think.
Then you need to understand why my content existed in the first place. My content existed because I tried my very hardest to be an absolute and utter realist, especially with uncomfortable truths. I was pointing out that very uncomfortable...
Is that a truth?
It's an uncomfortable truth in many parts of the world. It's not a truth that I'm happy about.
An inquest this week found that a 14-year-old girl, Molly Russell, died from an act of self-harm while suffering from depression and the negative effects of online content. The coroner said she was exposed to material that may have influenced her in a negative way, and in addition, what started as depression had become a much more serious depressive illness, and she very sadly took her life.
That's absolutely disgusting.
Right. Her father's campaign for better protections against potentially dangerous social media algorithms, right? It says that the particularly graphic content she saw romanticized acts of self-harm, normalized her condition, and focused on a limited and irrational view without any counterbalance of normality. First of all, what is your response to that? Nothing to do with you.
That's the first thing. Yeah, it is nothing to do with me. The fact that a 14-year-old girl took her life is truly sad. The world we live in today is... The fact that something like that happened is almost mind-blowing to me. That's truly sad. I actually feel sad inside to see something like that.
What has come clear to me in the interview?
I don't know what the point of that was. I mean, I'm going to guess that he brought it up because Tate was deplatformed everywhere. So Piers Morgan is making a roundabout argument that like, hey, maybe deplatforming or curating this stuff on social media is a good thing because we want to prevent stuff like this from happening. But if you're going to make that argument in the context of talking to Tate, you should be more specific about stuff Tate has said, Tate has done, to say, here's why it's reasonable for you to be, you know, deplatformed. But I don't know, maybe he didn't want to be that direct with his criticism because he would have feared a bigger debate. I genuinely don't know. I don't know. But obviously nobody wants anybody to go through that and kill themselves and, you know, be fed a steady diet of stuff on social media that leads them to think it's almost a rational thing to do to take their own life. So, I mean, I think everybody can condemn that. But, you know, the argument as to whether or not that bolsters deplatforming, I think, is a separate argument. You could really just tweak the algorithms to make it so that people are not being super served incredibly damaging content. Look, I would argue, you guys know this, when it comes to news and politics, what do they super serve people now on YouTube? Authoritative news sources, as they define it, which is CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all these terrible networks that get things wrong all the time, that are ruthlessly partisan, and I think it'd be better to tweak the algorithm to give more independent media outlets a shot, and go more like it used to be. Because it used to be a more meritocratic algorithm. Now it's not that. So I do think the algorithm conversation is complex and nuanced, and an interesting issue, but again, I don't really know exactly why he brought that point up.
Is that a lot of things you say you wouldn't say now that you've said before?
But I'd say them differently, perhaps.
Yeah, right. So to me, that's an acceptance. Not just that you want to get back on platforms, because maybe that was one of the reasons you were no platform, but that you've recognized and understood the potential harm to the wrong kind of impressionable mind by some of the things you've said. Would that be fair?
I think that's 80% fair. I recognize and understand that with massive fame, you have to be more careful about being misconstrued. Like I said earlier, 1% of people misunderstanding you doesn't matter with a small audience. It matters with a very large audience. With power comes responsibility. I still believe the things I say. I do not want to be a negative force for the world. I also understand that I am a man who's lived a very difficult, nuanced life, and I am capable of making nuanced points that may be misunderstood by teenagers. However, that can be said about anybody and everything. Every opinion online can be misunderstood by children. Trying to protect children from the internet is a very interesting subject in and of itself, because I would argue that 80% of the content on the internet can be negative or detrimental to a young mind that doesn't understand the world.
All right, so that's just a little piece of their interview. I'm sure they had a much, much longer interview than that. But yeah, so the stuff that I've seen from his sphere, and again, I haven't seen much of his stuff. And now again, he's off YouTube, so it's not like, you know, he's readily available, at least to me, because probably most of the stuff I see is on YouTube. But anyway, the stuff that I've seen from his orbit, like the Fresh and Fit guys, for example, this whole like red pill philosophy thing, it does have a mass appeal among young men, and you know, people who might not have a sense of direction, and this stuff speaks to them because it's filling a genuine void, this like vacuum of, I want to say, like basic father figure self-help stuff that you know, a version of encouragement that like young guys probably need to hear. Maybe not even just young guys, just people need to hear. And but I do think ultimately the arguments that they make, the philosophy that they push, it's a little bit of a false promise. It's not going to bring you happiness, because again, the general gist of the red pill philosophy is like, you know, men or boys are massive victims, and here's what you need to do to be successful, to be happy, to find joy, to find peace. You need to get your money right, you know, get money, basically get bitches, and it's almost like a consumerist philosophy where it's like, do the best that you can given the context of our like ruthless late stage capitalist system. And you know, the counter argument I would make is very simple. We've all seen what happens with some people who are phenomenally wealthy. They have all the money that they could ever need. They have all the women they could ever need or want, and they don't live happy, fulfilling, fruitful lives. I mean, it happens with all these Wall Street CEOs. It happens with these people who are basically born into money and inherited a tremendous amount of money. They might put on the social media facade that like, oh, everything's great here, you know, taking a picture on their fucking yacht or with their private jet or whatever. But a lot of these people are genuinely unhappy, and they are deeply unhappy. So I think to try to get boys and men to adopt this philosophy is actually detrimental to their well-being, because you know, the key to happiness and joy and meaning is much simpler than that. And it's really finding a purpose that is genuinely meaningful to you, and, you know, going all in on that. Now, that's easier said than done, right? Which is part of the problem. It's easier said than done, but it's much easier to find some joy, some happiness, some peace, some tranquility if you try a whole bunch of things when you're young, right? Whatever it is, various hobbies. It could be a sport. It could be a job. It could be something. It could literally be anything. And you keep trying a bunch of things until you find something that genuinely appeals to you sort of innately. And once you find that thing, put your everything into it to try to be the best you possibly can on that front. And then usually what happens is, when you sharpen your skill set and devote your all to something, then usually other things in your life come more seamlessly. They fall into place. You know, the time in my life when I was worst at talking to girls was when I was constantly consumed with how the fuck do I talk to girls? I would think about that all the time, right? And then I became good at doing it when I no longer gave a fuck about talking to girls at all, and I was just focusing on the shit that I liked and gave my all to it. So, and also this idea, this individualist system of like, you need to get money and do whatever you can to get your money up. It's like, it's a quick way to find yourself in a miserable circumstance where if you're just trying to make as much as you can as quickly as possible, you might end up taking some sort of a job that you fucking despise. You fucking despise. And then you drive yourself right to fucking cocaine abuse or alcoholism. And so it's much better to make a little less in the short run, but do something that you genuinely love, and then maybe over time, it might yield you more money in the future. So, I guess that would be my issue with this, like, red pill philosophy. There are some things I'm sure I would agree with the red pill guys on, right? Like, I have no problem with general basic self-help stuff. General basic, like, hey, sort of get your shit together stuff. In fact, sometimes I like that stuff. I like the motivational stuff. But I don't want, there's an overpromise here, right? The overpromise is like, if you do these things, then you will be in a good place. If you get your money up, if you get women, if you fucking stunt on social media, then everything's going to be great. And that's not necessarily the case, man. It's just not. And also, I would obviously disagree with major parts of their philosophy. Like, I think the whole argument of, like, men can have multiple women, but a woman can't have multiple men. It's like, how do you square that circle? And the only way they try is to say it's human nature. Okay, an argument requires more than just, you know, a reference to where you think it comes from, an impulse where you think it comes from. That's not enough. Imagine doing that. Like, somebody has a girlfriend, they cheat on their girlfriend with like 3 other women, and then when the woman confronts them, he's like, look, baby, it's in my nature. What do you want me to tell you? It's not sure that one's going to work out, Chief. But anyway, I don't know. Maybe one of these days I'll end up having a discussion with one of these red pill dudes, and we can flesh out our differences. But, I mean, this dude got wildly popular in a short amount of time, so I would argue there needs to be somebody else to fill that vacuum, fill that empty hole that men are gravitated towards. Like, hey, at least I'm getting some sort of advice and some sort of direction from this philosophy, even though that philosophy is ultimately pointing them in the wrong direction in many respects. There needs to be, like, there does need to be the equivalent of like a more like a left version of the self-help stuff out there. And the issue is, as you guys know, usually lefties, we, first and foremost, we criticize systems. And so when you have a systemic critique, that by its very nature is anti-individualist. So you're not really giving individual advice because you're busy critiquing the system. And on the one hand, that's good, that makes sense, because the main problem that we're facing are fucked up systems, right? But then on the other hand, it's like, well, how do you scratch that itch of people who need direction, but are not interested in your long dissertation about how to dismantle for-profit healthcare or whatever the fuck. So, look, it's an interesting problem. It hasn't been solved yet, but this guy, Tate, was deplatformed, and so now you're just going to have other Andrew Tates kind of fill that vacuum, and we've seen that with the Fresh and Fit guys coming up. And to be fair, I don't know if those guys have all the same beliefs as Tate, but, like, you know, there's going to be a game of whack-a-mole until you come up with an argument of philosophy and ideology that steers men away from this, like, get money, get bitches, and everything will be great philosophy. Because I'm telling you, that ain't the answer, dog. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.